Greetings, relatives. Osvaldo, Ozzie, Cruz here with the National Compadres Network, your host of the Sacred Manhood Initiative. I want to welcome everyone for being here with us today, and just want to remind folks that part of our work here at the National Compadres Network also involves uplifting the positive values, traditions, practices, our roles and responsibilities that exist within our Sacred Manhood responsibility. And so here today, I've asked members of our National Compadres Network familia to join us in a Platica, in a conversation discussion around fatherhood, what that means to us, what we've learned as a result of our journey on this fatherhood, and invite us to share some reflections. So with that, I want to again welcome you relatives. Thank you for accepting the invitation to be a part of this discussion. And before we begin, I want to be able to allow all of you to introduce yourselves in the way that you choose to introduce yourselves. And so with that, I'm going to invite Maestro Jerry to introduce yourself, Maestro.
Thank you. Muchas gracias. Good afternoon, everyone, wherever you're at. Jerry Tello, and I just want to begin as we begin today is just thanking the ancestors and all creation for another day of life, and for we're here because people have come before us and have really struggled and blessed us up and taught us many lessons and allowed us to be here. So I want to acknowledge all our relations that way as we begin. And as we do that, acknowledge all of you too, all of you, wherever you're sitting, wherever you're at, just to acknowledge you and your ancestors, in that role. Myself, I'm a father of five, a grandfather of seven, but a tío and to many people call me tío, call me tata, call me many things. But I'm a community servant and but I'm also Jorge Perez Tello's son and Mario de Suso Lague Ramos' son. So I'm really privileged to be here. Also, the founder of the National Compadres Network, where we've been on this journey for almost 40 years of trying to reclaim and reintegrate the sacredness of who we are as men, as fathers, as brothers, as compadres, tíos. And I'm really glad to be here to share it today. And I'll pass it to my nephew, Mario.
Saludos to everybody. I want to say thank you to our team and to everybody for joining us this afternoon. My name is Mario Ozuna-Sanchez. I've had the pleasure of being connected to the National Compadres Network going on close to almost 30 years now, and as well as serving as a community worker. And I show up today as a father for over 31 years, a husband for over 22 years, and a son of Margarita and Gabino Ozuna-Sanchez, who just believes it's important to do the work to make life a little bit better and honoring the offerings of our ancestors and those that came before us. So my title with the Compadres Network, I'm a senior manager, and I love being in good company with these folks. So I'm gonna pass the palabra over to my brother Cisco, who's gonna introduce himself.
Hello, so my name is Cisco Gallardo. Everyone calls me Cisco. I'm a senior manager for the National Compadres Network. And like for me, being a father, so I've been not only a father, stepfather, a bonus father, a lot of different roles, in my life. And I really appreciate just, having that role and opportunity in my life. But with that, I'll go ahead and pass it over to Michelle.
Hello, everyone. My name is Michelle Gonzalez, and I'm one of the program coordinators here at the National Compadres Network. I work really close with Cisco and Ozzie on the call. And today I'm coming as a daughter. I'm the daughter to Lucrecia Plazola Chavez and Martin Gonzalez Escatel, who are both from Tequila, Jalisco, Mexico. And I am very proud to say that I have roots over there. My entire family's over there, and I'm also a sister. I have an older sister, Jessica, who also gave me some lovely nephews and a bonus nephew, and an extended family to connect to from my cuñado side. And so My role here today is more so different than the rest of everybody else's, right? But happy to be in space with you all and be part of this conversation. Passing it over to Ozzie now.
Thank you, relatives, for introducing yourselves and for bringing in your familias. I too am a father. I'm a father of 4 children. Been on this fatherhood journey for close to 30 years. Also a husband to Jacqueline Cruz for about 18 years. And son of Maria Carmen Caro Dueñas, who's my mom, also originaria of the state of Jalisco, Mexico. And then also son to Jose Javier Cruz, my father, may he rest in peace. And so I'm going to take some liberties here as your host, not just to facilitate this conversation, but also to share what I too have learned as a dad and as a father figure to nephews and nieces and other relatives of mine. So I wanted us to start the conversation in sharing what we see as being our role as fathers, and invite any one of us to share what your thoughts are or how you see that role play out in your role as a father. I'll just mention as we begin this discussion that for me, it has always been at the forefront of how I define fatherhood to be a protector, to protect my children from harm, to protect them from others harming them. And so when I think of what that role as a father for me is, amongst many other things, it's always evident and present that my role is to protect my children. So I wanted to open the floor and to hear thoughts from the rest of you relatives. Just not all at once.
Well, I'll go ahead. And share a little bit, as a father and grandfather. I've learned that one of the most important things for me is to show up.
Mm.
And it seems like a very simple thing, to be present for your children, but it's not always easy. It's not always easy to show up for a whole lot of different reasons, because of the obligations we have, with work and doing what we need to do in life. But also, when I think about it from an emotional, spiritual standpoint, how do I show up in a good way? Not show up with my wounds, but show up in a good way so that what my children receive from me is the better part of me. But as I mentioned that, I also have learned that it's also important for my children, grandchildren, to see that I'm also just a person. I'm just a man. And that sometimes I have feelings, sometimes I'm not good, sometimes I'm struggling, sometimes, I have emotions. Sometimes, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to guide them. I don't know how to solve their problems. I don't know how to protect in a good way, because you mentioned protect, Ozzie. When we grew up, protect was, you get ready to throw down, and sometimes that anger and those things, and especially right now, I want to acknowledge that right now, especially where we're at here in Los Angeles, there's a lot going on in terms of fear and immigration and everything. And how do we show up for our children even with that, without that anger, but in a truthful way. So showing up is not always easy, And what I've seen, I've had to kind of heal from some of the ways that I've seen my dad and my tío show up, because many times they showed up, especially in difficult times, drinking or in other ways, and I don't want my kids to see that example of me. So I really concentrate on how do I show up in the best way, in an honest way, but in a way that I can share, but also learn from my kids in that way, that way of showing up. So, Pastor Mario.
I appreciate what both of you have said, and I think about, I can't talk about my role as a father without acknowledging my fatherhood journey.
Mm.
I was a teen father, and then I navigated in being a single teen father, to then being able to be a young adult who then created a family and was able to, bring in additional beautiful babies into the world. And my journey has always kind of amplified my role. Um, and I've learned that as a father to give myself grace with that, because my role when I was 15 years old of what I thought I had to be as a dad has always changed. And it's changed in connection to my journey. And I think as dads, that's something that we're not oftentimes given a level of understanding or grace or support. You know, even right now, like respecting what Maestro's speaking about in terms of acknowledging this attack on our people, right? Because there's an attack, we want to step up and be warriors. But in that mindset of stepping up, we also remember that we have people that are dependent on us.
Mm.
So how do you navigate that? How do I live with that? How do I connect? The other thing I feel is important, real quickly, in terms of my role as a dad is acknowledging my needs to be the best person I can in loving them, but in also loving myself,
Mm.
because I'm supposed to be a reflection. I didn't grow up with a healthy father, and all of what he taught me was what not to do. So now that I'm stepping up, to my children, who are all young adults now. My oldest Miguel is 31. My daughter Ileana is 22, and my youngest Alejandro is going to be 21. I've learned that I could say a lot, but if I'm not an example of it or living it, it doesn't matter what I say. My actions are what carry the biggest weight. So I think in order to have that understanding of being a reflection to my children, it also carries a way of how I want to be seen and how I want to honor who I really am, and loving myself for that in order to reflect that to them. So that's kind of like where I'm at today in that journey. Pass it to my brother Cisco.
The role of a father and the roles we play, I would say, like, for me and my family, I had my dad around, but he wasn't the best father. He just had so much other life stuff going on. He couldn't be there. So it was really hard for me. And my first brush with fatherhood, my daughter died, and she was a baby still, and all the hopes and dreams and all the love. You buy everything. Her room was ready. She just never made it out of the hospital. She couldn't make it. And then as I became father to other kids, I really did my best. I think the one thing that my mom taught me, ironically, not my dad, is to have cariño, that caring, nurturing love. You know what I mean? Nurture your kids to be good and not only to be good, but to attract good things, and things like that. To be a part, have fun, enjoy your life, learn all those things, as you prepare to be an adult. And I think for me, my role as a father was not to predetermine how I want them to believe like me or walk like me or whatever they do. I want them to be them, but be happy, and if they need to explore, I want to be the person that explores with them, and not puts them down for not believing what I believe. As parents, we want our kids to walk our same path. But I've understood, I've been a father enough times to know that kids have their own journey, their own onda, and all we can do is just provide those guardrails and be the most loving person we can, even when we're angry. There's a point where yelling does no good. It's just having that frank conversation, a hug afterwards. Like, to me, that encapsulates being a father. Like, when they're having a good time and laughing, that's when I'm laughing and having a good time. Because whenever I see them smile, it really helps me out too. So that's what I try to work towards. With that, I'll pass it over to Michelle.
Thank you. From my experience, my father's role, growing up until this day, is of being the protector, being a provider, and being a caretaker. And the way that it showed up for me growing up was my dad always worked 3 jobs. So he took on the responsibility of I need to provide. I'll ensure that my wife takes some time off when our babies are born so that she can be present for the both of us. And he was always looking out for us. So even when we were sick, even though it might have been difficult, he would take time off and he would give up work in order to take us to the doctor or pick us up from school if an emergency arose. If there was something missing in the fridge, he would take it upon himself to go to the grocery store and make sure that we had a fridge full. And because he worked 3 jobs, he wasn't always able to be present in the ways that sometimes as kids we want them to be present. But he would show up in ways that he could, right? So for him, it was being in the know, knowing where we were and ensuring that we were safe all the time. As an adolescent, I didn't understand that, and I would get annoyed by all his text messages and his phone calls of "Where are you now?" and "Why did you move location? Who are you with?" But it was for my safety. Now I know that. And when I went away for college, even though he would say, "I don't care if I'm annoying, I'm going to call you at least once a week because your mom is too shy to do it and I want to make sure you're okay. How are you doing?" Right? And he's still the one between the two of them to call me and check up on me. And he was always the one to, if he couldn't show up to my sport events, he would at least ensure that he was present at my celebrations or that he could support me with an academic project, an art project. Which were different ways for us to bond, right? And for him to be there for me.
Thank you, Michelle, and thank you, relatives. It's almost impossible to describe our roles and our fatherhood journey in the short time that we have. But as you all were sharing, I was reflecting on, showing up, and that sometimes we don't show up in the best way. And as I'm thinking about our role and the reflection that we want to be for our children, is that we make mistakes too, as men and as fathers, and in the same way that our dads made mistakes too, right? I think about the example that we as fathers have to be for our children, in that if we never apologize, then we're teaching our children that we never make a mistake, that we're never wrong. And I'm thinking about how that for many years in my fatherhood journey, I struggled to say that I'm sorry. I struggled to say I'm sorry that I didn't show up. I'm sorry that I prioritized work over your graduation ceremony. Learned some things since those stories and those experiences. But just reflecting on what all of us are sharing here about the role of fathers and how we need to be providers and nurturing and loving and caring and within all of that, being supportive. I think one of the things that I want to ensure that all of my children know and my loved ones is that I will never turn my back on them. May not agree with some of the things they do and choices they make, but I think it's important for me as a dad is to ensure that my children know that the dad's got your back, right, no matter what. And so, as you all were sharing, that's what I was processing and reflecting on. But I like to, and we spoke about this a little bit to some of this. But what have we learned? Like, what is a couple of things, and maybe not one, but I know I have many things that we learned throughout this fatherhood journey that we can share with others, and maybe it resonates with them, maybe it supports them on their fatherhood journey, or also in understanding their fathers, right, in that relationship that we as children have with our parents. So anyone who'd care to respond to that, what we've learned that we like to share with others as a part of our fatherhood journey.
I would say the best thing is, when I was young, my brother, my sister would always get mad at my dad for for drinking too much, and they would put conditions on their love that they would accept from him, which is it's not really a cultural thing at all. It kind of goes outside of our culture, not to listen and listen to our parents in that way. But my dad, I mean, I always felt like a lesson I learned with my kids is I'm never gonna control them to the point where they're not mine to own. They're mine to guide and to help them find their own way. And it was hard for me because I didn't really have that as a kid. You know what I mean? I just had my mom, and my mom did the best she could. But as a father, I've always tried to just be there for them and really let them figure out their own journey and try to provide opportunities that support them. And my daughter, even just something simple, she like emo stuff. And so I helped her. I took her to concerts, and I wouldn't fight her about buying stuff. I had limits, like no piercings, things like that. But it was always a negotiation to a degree. I wanted to give them agency in their everyday life, but at the same time, we're here to be the guidance, you know what I mean? And when they fall, to be there to pick them up without judgment. And it's hard because we are disappointed. And I've said that, right now you've disappointed me, but at the same time I still love you. And it's all right. Let's dust each other off and keep moving. You know what I mean? I learned not to hold on to that anger, especially with your kids and even your parents. It's not good to hold on to it, especially if you're not in control of it. You just kind of have to let it. And I think my older kids today, I have kids that are in their 30s and in their late 20s. And I think we have a really good relationship because, at the end, when you're at this stage in parenting, it's good just to build a relationship on like watching each other grow, you know what I mean? And sharing. And I think there's a part of parents where our kids, they want to share things with us. And we don't see them as equals in a lot of ways. We don't see them as adults and grown, and they have their own mindsets and stuff like that. In my early part of being a father, I kind of messed that up a little bit. I didn't know when to let go, but I've learned from that. You have to let them grow up, and you have to meet them where they're at. That would be my biggest lesson that I learned. And that's happened to me also with other people in the community that I took on as community family sons and daughters.
Appreciate that, Cisco. Anyone else care to respond?
I'll jump in there I think, and some of it is a little bit of piggybacking on what Cisco said. But some of it is like I said, I grew up with my oldest. I've been a dad now for the last handful of years to young adults. And what I really appreciate about fatherhood is knowing that it's a life responsibility. I think society likes to make it, and I've heard dads like until you're 18, until you're 18. And if we think about it, that's actually going to be the smallest part of their life, even though it's
Yeah.
the most impactful parts.
I agree.
And what I really feel is important, because even now, as a almost 48-year-old man, I still need my dad, and I still would have wanted a dad.
Mhm.
And I remind myself a lot that like I have to carry that journey for that responsibility for life. And like what Cisco said is important though, but it changes. It evolves. And that means I have to always just remind myself I could only do my best. So don't stop trying. And
Mhm.
and that's very important too, because I think we beat ourselves up a lot over our failures versus lifting up our successes. And sometimes the best thing I could do is just know that I did my best
Mm.
and then the next day get up and keep at it and never give up. But I would also say the last thing that I think is important to learn as a dad, and I would challenge people to start doing this at a younger age, is to also see themselves as curse breakers.
Mm.
But be a curse breaker based on the realities of your children and of your community today. Like the quickest example I could give is my daughter wanting to go out as a young teenager. And my daughter was almost a straight A student, star athlete, leadership, cheerleader, doing everything. And quickly I was like, okay, baby, you could go out. You could go out on Wednesday and go do what you're gonna do. And then she came back that Friday saying, oh, Dad, I want to go out again with my friends. And my quick response was, oh no, you already went out. And she's like, oh, I know, but I want to go out again. And I'm like, no, but you already did your one. You already went out once this week. And then my wife looks at me and says, but why does that matter? Because I grew up being told that that's the way it was. But that wasn't relevant. My daughter didn't, there was no reason to restrict her except for what I thought culturally was what we were supposed to do. And then, so within that, I learned to be like, oh, okay, like that doesn't, like we have to evolve, we have to grow. So that's one of the things, and in a very simple way that I would really challenge men to and fathers to be very conscious of how you allow yourself to break the curse based on what your family and your community needs.
Mm, mm. Appreciate that from the both of you, Cisco, Mario. Adelante, Maestro.
Yeah. What it brings to mind is doing my own work, because, and you bring up your daughter. I remember, the fear that I had
Mm,
when my daughter wanted to go out and she wants to go out with this guy, and I'm like, who is he? Bring him here. I gotta meet him. And I got very barrio, and she says, Dad, he ain't going out with you. He's going out with me. Why you gotta meet him? And but this fear, and the fear came from what I saw when I was a kid. The fear came from the experiences that I saw that, of men really disrespecting women and all of those things. And I hadn't even processed that. I even thought about that. And it even came out of my body because I was talking to my daughter, my fists were locked up and I was all rigid and I didn't even know that. My body was responding to that. So what it said to me is, that I had to do my work so that I don't put my fears on my children, you know. But at the same time to be able to acknowledge, to my kids, and I'm feeling a little afraid right now. It had nothing to do with you, it's me, it's dad, uh, you know, but doing my own work and I really want to acknowledge, the hombres, the círculo de hombres that, we started doing círculos some 38 years ago. And the men is the other men that taught me, the other men that became an example, the other men that really helped me, being with other men. And there's a myth. There's a myth out there that some people still say. They say that men, and especially Chicano, Latino, Native men, don't want to talk about their feelings. They don't want to emote. They want to, I want to break that. That's not true. That's not true. You put us in a good place where we feel respected and we feel honored and we feel safe and we feel like we're not going to be judged. And you will see the emotions come up. You will see the healing take place. We want to be good fathers, but sometimes we don't know how. And sometimes we need examples and we need support. And sometimes we need to be checked too. We need to be the accountability too. And so I really appreciate, all of you sharing. But Michelle, I want to just appreciate you and what you said about your dad. That sometimes we have to work and we can't be there, but we try and do the best that we can. And what really helps us is when our kids say, thanks, Dad, for this. I appreciate you for that. I know you tried to do that, because that helps us too to do our own healing, but then to show up the next time.
mm.
Gracias.
Appreciate what's been shared. And the talk about the fear of not showing up in a good way, the fear of what may happen to our children and their experiences. And I have to remind myself that in my role as a dad and raising my children, that my children are not me. That my children weren't raised in South Central LA, that my children didn't have the experiences that I had, that I'm grateful for. I'm grateful that they didn't have the experiences, and that their struggles are different, right? Their struggles are different. And to your point, Mario, around this conditioning of how we expect and these expectations that we put on our kids and these rules, I'm thinking of having to remind myself all the time, how do I ensure that at the end of the day, my children feel accepted by me and not criticized by me, because I can do that, and not bullied by me, because I can do that and have done that, right? But to ultimately for them to say, at the end of the day, my dad appreciated who I am. And I know for me where that struggle comes from. That struggle comes from there's attributes, skills, gifts that I carry that I want my children to carry, but that's not their gift. They have a different gift. And sometimes as parents, as dads, we're challenged with accepting our children for who they are versus who we want them to be for us.
Mhm.
Not a bad thing. It just means, can I really treasure and appreciate you for your flow, the way that you do things, right? And so what has been one of those things that I've learned through that journey is ensuring that my children feel accepted by me, right? Because that is not the reality for many of us. It has been our experience. So, speaking of fears and our role and our responsibility, and we've mentioned this as we were having this conversation, is that we're living in a reality in which there are separations of families. There are children who don't know where their fathers are, who their relatives are, when will be the next time that they will see their relatives. And, it reminds me of times in the 1980s where my mom, who came here as an immigrant woman, who was raising three children by herself, would share with us how ICE would show up at her fabrica, at her place of work, and how all of the workers would run towards the back corner part of that warehouse, that fabrica, and they would pile up on top of each other, right? And then they cover themselves up with fabric, and they would be there for hours. And I remember as a kid, having fear that I wouldn't see my mom again. You know, having fear of how are we going to raise ourselves if this is our only caretaker, this is our only parent, and I'm seeing and it's being shared with me what's happening in our communities, and that's the reality that we're living in today, where many of our peoples are being persecuted, pushed out, families are being separated, and so this is our reality. I like to invite us to speak to how we show up for our children, knowing that there's a lot of fear in our communities right now.
I'll get us started on this one. And I'll say that that's the beautiful thing about these teachings that our elder Maestro Jerry, many of our elders across the communities and our circles have taught us is to be able to create space to let our kids talk, to hear them out, to not be the ones that have all the answers, but know that we're walking with them through this journey. That and share our truth too, share how we're feeling, share our struggles, help co-create something that can benefit the community where all people feel they have a role in how to step up and how to be there. And really also let our families lead too, because our kids also, and being the next generation, maybe they have the better answers. Maybe they're better equipped than we are in how to handle some of these realities. And that's one thing now in my life. I love being a cheerleader. I love being on the sides and being a follower to my kids and letting them tell us what is it that we need to do. So, and I'm thankful that these ways taught me that. These ways gave me the patience to see that. And then I'm excited to see how the next generation is going to carry it. So that's what I would offer about that. I'm gonna pass it to Maestro.
Yeah, I learned early on, growing up in Compton, that there was those days in which you didn't know what to do. And I just want to bring in my grandma's teachings that she would go in front of that altar and light the vela and call the Virgin and all of her spirits and just ask for help and ask for guidance and ask for prayers. And she would pray for everybody. And sometimes we'd be afraid and she's, Miko, va a estar bien, it's gonna be okay. And and I know that I've said this to my kids too. It's gonna be okay, but not sure inside what to do, but that our traditions, our culture, uh, our valores can help us, And I think as Mario says, there's different roles that we play. And yesterday we were on a call with some elders, and Mama Carol from Louisiana mentioned about the three lines. She says she learned in the civil rights movement that there's three lines, and that some of us are to be on the front line, and to be on the front line protesting and advocating and shouting and doing all of that. And that's some of our role is to be on that front line. But then you have the second line, and the second line are those people that are supporting those on the front line, bringing them food, helping them, giving them transportation, housing them, doing all that stuff to support those that are on the front line, right? And then you have the third line. And the third line are those people that are praying, that are creating, all the support in a larger way. Those that are orchestrating, the ones that are lawyering, the ones that are, figuring out all the other intricacies of policy and stuff. You have some people says the important thing is to be in a line, to be someplace in one of those lines. And I think we as fathers, sometimes we need to be out there, and as a viejito, maybe, Maestra Susie, she says, no, because the cops, you can't run fast enough, fool. You can't, we have different roles. We have different roles. And I think, Mario, you're right. Some of our young people, they have better answers than us somewhat, and they have their own role too, I would be interested to hear from Michelle, in terms of all of this, how her father, what she needs from what she thinks we need, as a child, as a daughter, as a, what role do you think we need to play in difficult times like this? What is it that you would need, what you think families need from their fathers?
Thank you for asking me, Maestro. For me, I can share a little bit of both, right? Where I've seen how my dad reacts to situations like this in the past from when I was a kid. Um, and even where I see my role as a daughter now. So I have a vague memory of I grew up in Huntington Park, here in the Los Angeles area, and I have a vague memory of one time when I was really young and we were at a fair, one of the community fairs that would happen 2 times out of the year back then. And while I was getting on a ride, there was whispers about ICE being in the neighborhood. I got on the ride, and when I got off, I just saw chaos and people running around everywhere. And then I remember my dad kind of just snatching me up, picking me up, and making sure that we were all gathered up and ensuring that we got home safe. In different situations, where we live in a really busy avenue now, and where there's been an accident, my dad is quick on his feet to react and go help and be a leader of call the ambulance, call 911, and hey, everybody, let's get over here and let's pick up the car and help this person out, right? And so he's that type of person. He's solution oriented, and he's quick to react and just help whoever needs help. My dad is now an Uber driver, and with everything that's been going on in the city, I feel that my role is just to kind of let him know what's going on and in what streets, just to ensure that he's safe if he's driving around in that area. And I've definitely taken into account, the fact that he always wants to know that I'm safe and where I am if I'm perhaps in a location that may not be unsafe. And so as a teenager, when I participated in protests, and this is still a habit that I have now that I'm older, if I choose to go and be part of the folks who are in those protests, I will let them know. Like, hey, I'm gonna go here, and I explain I'm going for X and Y reason, and this is the role that I'm taking here, and I don't want you to worry, and here is my location.
Thank you for that, Michelle. Appreciate that. Did you want to chime in on this topic here, Cisco?
Yeah, I would say, my role too as a father, especially during tough times, I think it's, to be level-headed. A lot of times my wife, she looks to me be the family leader. The instant thing something happens, boom, she wants me to take the lead and do all that. And I appreciate that. Sometimes I don't have all the answers. And I think as a father, as a man, I learned, and I've come to understand that, the first thing is gather the information, before you do anything else, make sure everyone's okay. And then, start moving forward the best you can without overreacting, and letting things play out before you overreact too much. And I think you being calm as a father, because there are many tough times that happen, be it, money issues, be it family fighting with family, community, school issues. There's many things that come up. So being level-headed, doing your best to think critically. And I think your kids watch you the way you handle problems. And as a father, I always wanted them to understand that maybe I don't have all the answers, but cooler heads prevail. You do your best to relax, figure out what's going on, and take the best action. And you can always pivot. That's the beautiful thing. Like nothing's the end of the world. Even if it might be uncomfortable, you will get through it. And that kind of faith I know has translated to my kids, because as adults, they've shared that with me. And I still have two younger ones, 14 and 12, and they're still at that time where they're governed by emotions, and they always wonder, how does this not bother you? And so we have to talk through that, but that's part of it, right? Being a quiet leader, letting them go along with it. You know what I mean? Because at the end of the day, I don't want them. They're going to be the head of their own families at some point, and I want them. I always talk to them about preparing, and I think the best as a parent you can do, especially as a father, is prepare the best you can. And when things come your way, do your best to figure it out, and include them in the solutions as a part of a family. You know what I mean? Like, and that's the hard part really, is making sure you're helping them get those skills they need to be good parents in their own lives. So whatever that looks like for them.
Appreciate that, brother. Thank you. I'm thinking about tough times, and I know that we centered part of this conversation around what's happening with the ICE raids, but tough times is also relevant. Many of us live tough times on a daily basis. Tough times meaning oppression, racism, discrimination, community violence, and what's resonating for me, Cisco, that you were mentioning is being able to have conversations specifically about being prepared, right? Prepared so that we know how to respond, prepared so that we know how we're communicating. To Michelle's point, we know where our families are at, where we're going, what time we're supposed to be coming back. And I think it's I'm borrowing the words of, I think is the Baba Greg when he speaks about if you stay prepared, then you don't have to prepare, right? And that is ongoing. It's ongoing. It's a part of the role as dads, as parents. But I don't want to take away from the fact that we're approaching Father's Day, and I know that I don't want to negate or minimize the reality and how that reality is impacting even how we celebrate graduations at this moment, and the people that are scared to show up because of what's happening. But I do want to focus on honoring Father's Day, and wanted to ask us here if you can share what that means to you. What does Father's Day mean to you? Just not all at once, relatives. I
I'll start. I would say Father's Day, like, it's nothing like Mother's Day. You know what I mean? But at the same time, to be honest, I always felt like if my family does a lot for me, I don't know, I feel some way about it. Just a good meal, hanging out together, I'm okay with that. Something simple. To me, it's just, and I like the way my wife, she talks to the girls, that this is a day we celebrate your dad, for all the little things he does for you that you don't really, you might not pay attention, but he's doing all these things for you all the time. You're always on our mind. You're always doing this. And just the and the smiles that we get, they want to hang around you. And I've got some crazy presents over the time. And I think that's what the kids I think they want to see you smile and do something nice. So to me, that's the good thing. Last year my kids got me this big old thermos. I don't know where I would use this thermos, but I'm happy they thought of me, and they got it my favorite color, green. You know what I mean? This is one of those things that when I look at it, they make me laugh and things like that. So for me, that's Father's Day. Even when I was young, and my dad always made my grandpa the number one. We'd go visit my grandpa on Father's Day, because even though my dad wasn't really there for me, he was there. My grandpa was there for him, and he wanted us to understand what a big man my grandpa was. When they say a grande, they mean like not personality wise, love wise, all that. And to me, if I ever fill those shoes to my grandpa status, that would make me happy.
Mm, appreciate that, brother. Thank you. Michelle, you wanted to chime in?
Yes. For me in my home, we definitely celebrate not just my dad, but all the fathers in our family. So that includes my cuñado and his father, right? Um, and coming together to love him up. And so for the most part, they just appreciate a good carne asada, and spending time together with their grandkids, spending at least half a day together. Um, and and especially for me, it's important to show and express gratitude and appreciation. Um, and and so my dad is someone who's always been very good with his words and the way that he expresses himself. Um, I sometimes have a difficult time maybe expressing them in the moment, so I make sure that I at least have time to write them down, and hand them to him. And I've been thinking a lot about different ways in which I can show him how to better take care of himself, and particularly his body. My dad is someone who just, like, the amount of work that he's done, like physical labor, and continues to do at his age. Um, I I like to remind him that we need to be a little bit more tender with our bodies. And so I'm someone who, due to certain injuries that are still pains and groins that are still kind of lingering around, like, I like to get a massage, and I feel that my dad is just as deserving of one as well. And if I can sponsor one, at least for that day or every now and then, because he still does a lot of physical labor. Those are ways that I like to show him some appreciation, right? Things that he's also deserving of, and give him those gentle reminders that it's okay to take a day off to take care of yourself.
Oh, thank you, Michelle. Beautiful.
Well, I'll share. I appreciate calls and notes. Not all my kids live in the city here, and so I'm not able to see them. But it's beautiful to get text and to get FaceTimes, and Emilio, a lot of times with his family, they'll do a little video, and they're singing. He's singing with a guitar, and those things that just make you happy, if they're thinking about you. To me, it's their presence and their words. I love to read, and for the little ones, for them to draw pictures, and, that this is Tata and this is me, this pictures and all these different things. And sometimes, my kids have asked them, so what is Tata? When you think about Tata, what does it mean? He plays with me, I mean, so just those, and I save all those things. I have cards, and I have the things that they've written. I save them all. I have a big drawer with all of them in there, and once in a while I just pick them out and read them, you know. It's those are the things, and I just want to encourage people that, your dad may not be around.
Mm,
um, send them a text, send them a call, and for our relatives that are behind that are locked up or whatever, they need to hear it too, you know,
Mm-hmm.
especially those que no están aquí con nosotros. They're, in Mexico, other places, send them something, let them know that you care about them. It's just, and many of us as dads don't know how to accept it. We just play it, oh, thank you, yeah, muchas gracias, but it stays with us for a long, long time. It stays with us for a long time that way. So just want to encourage people to do that, and thank you all that do that anyway. Thank you. I want to just acknowledge you for that.
Thank you, Maestro. Mario.
This year I told my wife that I don't want gifts. Material items no longer really matter as much to me. And I said, I want the gift to be that each of them on their own, including my daughter-in-laws, including my granddaughter, I want to have a lunch or a breakfast. That's all I want. And so I'll go have a lunch with my son, with my older son, my younger son separately. And I guess it goes along with what people are saying. I just want to spend time with them. That's all I want. I just want to get to continue to know them and hear about their lives and their wants, their dreams, and just sit there and be proud of them. And sit there and be thankful that they are my children and they are my loved ones. So that's what Father's Day. And I don't want to do it on Father's Day. Father's Day, we'll do the carne asada and all that stuff. But I don't want gifts. I just want their time. And I'm hoping that I'm worthy of their time.
Thank you, brother. Wow. I thought of this for me for a long time, what Father's Day means to me, and I haven't been raised without my father. Not getting to know my father till I was about 18 years old, and at that point, I'd already become a father, and then lost my father a few years later to alcoholism. It's always been a struggle because I didn't get to write a Father's Day card to my dad. Didn't have those celebrations growing up, and when my children celebrate me, it's hard for me to accept it. When I think of Father's Day for me, I think of what didn't I do throughout the year that I can take today the opportunity to do with my kids. That's how I look at it. And I appreciate the gifts. Like many of you, I prefer not a Hallmark card, but a hand-drawn card with a lot of besitos and hearts. And those are the ones that I hold on to, and really appreciate the fact that there's people who see me as worthy of being honored and celebrated. In spite of all of my mistakes, in spite of sometimes prioritizing other things. But I too want a massage. And throw a pedicure in there si se puede, Awesome. And not just one massage, but two, and throughout the year. And so with that, I want to appreciate all of you relatives for, sharing of your heart, sharing of your mind and your stories and your families. And before we close off, I just want to, in brief, see if there's any last minute reflections, any one teaching that you want to leave our audiences with that you'd like to share before I close this off for today.
Well, I'll just begin. I know we're all on a journey, and I know there's some men out there that are still on that journey and are trying to heal. Take advantage of reaching out to find your healing, to find that path, to reach out for the assistance and support that you need. It'll be worth it in the end. Many of us have slipped and fall and done things that we need to ask forgiveness for, but then to do better. And there's always an opportunity. Take today to be the first step that you move forward in that. It'll be worth it in the end. If nothing else, reach out to the National Compadres Network. We have círculos and resources, different places. And there's other organizations that do too. But I just want to, one of the best gifts you can give your families is to be on the road to healing and be on the road to recovering your sacredness that way.
Thank you, Maestro.
I would say, if I could jump in here, I would say
you know, find other fathers, your compadres that you meet with, that you're kind of, all my best friends I grew up with, we were extended fathers to their kids. You know, we raised their kids together, you know, through good times and bad times. So I would say reach out. You know, you're not the only one that has to go through it. And I know as fathers, it's hard for us to ask for help. And sometimes we feel like we're the last in the family, you know, but you know, that's a part of life. And if we could, you know, circle up, even if it's not a formal thing, even if you're just talking to your compadres, celebrate each other too as fathers. Celebrate each other. Like if your kids don't know how to do it, maybe your wife didn't have a father, maybe she doesn't know how to do it either, but together you guys could create your own version of the holiday for what you and your family, you know. It's all right if they don't have the way of doing it, you know, kind of figure it out together. I think that would be a big thing. And you know, I know me and my friends have done that. You know, we've been really strong compadres to each other and our kids, you know. And to this day, you know, I have many kids, extended kinship through this community that we built. And I would say every father, don't try to do it alone. You know, you're not alone. You know, do your best. And if you're a father out there, this used to break my heart. There'd be a lot of fathers who don't have contact with their kid. I would say it's all right to reach out and just say, you know, hey, I miss you, love you, thinking about you. That's it. And you know, it might need to sit with them for a while. You know, it might need to sit with them, but at least make the effort. You know, you're gonna feel better, and they're gonna feel better too. So with that,
Appreciate that, brother. Any Michelle?
Yeah, I also wanted to mention, you know, my my dad being so fortunate to just be surrounded by women throughout the majority of his life, because we were all women in the home. We weren't, or at least I wasn't always so gentle and compassionate with him. And I'm learning now that, you know, the human in him, and how I could have been a lot more patient and compassionate with him. And I'm definitely learning to practice that a lot more now. And especially through this work, right? I've reflected a lot on how I can better show up for my dad, and how I can better have those conversations, how we can both continue to learn and unlearn together, and make him part of the conversation, right? Make him part of my reflections, and how we can mend whatever wounds we might have inflicted on each other. So be compassionate to your fathers. Be gentle and soft with them too. They also need that. And I'll pass the palabra if anybody else wants to add, or if Ozzie wants to close us off.
Thank you, Michelle. Appreciate that. If there are no other comments, Mario, I'd like to close us out and to share what was shared with me by one of my mentors, Carlos Sanchez, who speaks about the greatest gift that you can give your grandchildren is to love your own children. So by virtue of loving our children, we will transfer that love onto our grandchildren. And so I want to thank all of you. This particular session on fatherhood is very special and unique because it's us here at the National Compadres Network, our internal team members that were here sharing with all of you. There are many others who wanted to be a part of this panel, which will provide another opportunity for them to share. But deep appreciation to all of you for your sharing. For those of you that are listening to us, please stay tuned for upcoming episodes of our Sacred Manhood Initiative. Please feel free to follow us on Facebook and Instagram at la.cultura.cura, and as well as our website at the www.National Compadres Network. And thank you, relatives, again for this Platica and this discussion. May all of you that be listening have a wonderful, beautiful, joyful celebration on Father's Day.
Happy Father's Day. Yeah.
Feliz Día del Padre. Adiós.